And we're back. Thank you for so much for hanging out with us and checking out that last commercial for our Patreon. And we are here with Zach and our YouTube viewers. Don't worry, this link will be included in our YouTube contents down below. You guys have heard enough of me talking about this time, so we're going to go ahead and get diving right into some Zach and Blender here as soon as I figure out my computer and thingies. All right, you guys ready? Zach, take it away. The show is yours. There we go. Right there, yours.
Cool. Alrighty. So we're gonna go ahead and just get kind of right on into things, picking up where we left off last week. Last week we built a little table, experimenting with modeling using manipulation, using 3D objects that are already pre-built. So we pretty much just messed around with cubes in a plane last week. So Brian is posting the Dropbox link for the file if you want to take a look at that, so you can pick up where we are. It's the exact same file that I'm looking at right now. So today we're actually going to mess around a little bit more with extrusion modeling, which is a lot more powerful, but you've kind of got to get your core basics down. So let me go ahead and share screens right here. Boom. That should work. Start. There we go. That should be good. All right. So here's our scene where we picked up last week. So we're gonna.
Hang on, Zach. We have a technical difficulty.
Okay.
I am not. I am not seeing your screen right off the hand.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
Let's see. I can stop.
There. I see you.
All right. Share screens again.
Hey, there we go. All right. I'm going to hush
Got it.
now. I'm going to turn my mic off.
Let's see. We good to go? There you go. All right, cool. All right. So again, this is where we picked up. This is where we left off last week. Our basic table. Is it going? Oh, there it is. Okay. So what we're going to do this week is just kind of flesh out this scene a little bit. So at the moment, if I can get it going here. All right, there we go. At the moment, if you hit F12 to render this, we've got a nice little camera or nice little scene with the green ground and a blue sky. But this isn't very interesting, so we're gonna kind of liven this scene up a little bit by practicing some extrusion-based modeling. So the first thing that I figured we could work with would be making some cups and some plates to go on our table here, because most people like to have those when you go on a picnic because it helps keep the ants away. Also, drinking out of one communal water bottle is probably a bad idea. So for starters, let's go ahead and make some classic red Solo cups. That should be fairly straightforward. Most people, I think, have an idea of what that kind of looks like. So one thing to know that we could do here is work on multiple layers. If you're familiar with any sort of Photoshop or GIMP, any art software usually has layers. So that's these functions right down here. If you can see right below the mouse, it's these little boxes right here. So you can go to multiple layers. Just allows you to have more workspace without working all on top of the same objects. So for now, I'm just going to go to the second layer just to make things a little easier. And you'll see what it looks like. Maybe I'll do the plates on the same layer, so it's doable. And I did that when I began, but it can be a little easier sometimes when you manage with layers. Anyways, so we're gonna hit Shift C to center our cursor again because we don't want something happening way in the middle over here. I'm gonna hide this panel over here with N, and you can also hide this panel over here with T if you would like. So now then, so let's go ahead and hit Shift A. Shift A is gonna add a new object. So we want a mesh. And we could start with a we could start with a cylinder if we wanted, because the cup's very similar to a cylinder. But for now, let's just start with a circle. This is going to be a little bit more interesting in some regards, but it'll help you get the idea of extrusion down. So when you look at extrusion, it's the best way to think of it is adding an extra dimension to something. You're pulling material out and creating more dimension to it. So if I was to extrude a single point right here and hit E for extrusion, now I have a line. So I went from a one-dimensional point to a line. So now instead of just having a point space, I have a length with it. So, and if you were to extrude the full circle, you create an extra, you create more space with that. You've got the extra dimension going along with it. So this is really where a lot of our power is going to sit, and how we create this full object. So from the beginning, what we're going to do is, and if this still doesn't really make much sense to you, think of it this way. So if you have, let me switch my screens real quick. Stop sharing. Cool. So that should bring it back to me. All right. So if you have a ball of yarn sitting right here, and you were to extrude out one point, you take that one point and you pull it out. It's just like pulling out a string of yarn. So you have one string coming out from that point. And just by extruding one point, you create a line coming outwards. And similarly, if you had a large stack of paper, just opened a ream of paper for the copier, and you pull one sheet out from in the middle of it, so you have a full item, and you pull out a single sheet from a three-dimensional object, you create just this 2D plane. So that's basically the idea of extrusion. If you take a 3D object and extrude it into 3D, that's a bad idea. Just don't do it. You can play around with it. It looks cool, but it's not very practical. So let's go ahead and get back to what's going on here. Let me know if that has any issues, Brian, but I think it should be good. All right, so with this circle right here, we're going to extrude it. And by extruding upwards, we're adding depth. Essentially, from every single point on here is going to be a point to the exact same thing of itself. So if we extrude upwards, and I'm just holding Control to snap, and then left click to confirm that command. If we extrude this upwards, we now have a hollow cylinder from the base of the circle. So you can kind of see every single point goes straight up from where the previous one was. And actually, I think I have multiple on top of this. So let me do a little trick real quick. Boom. Okay, cool. Yeah, I did have that. All right. So let's see here. All right. I'm going to actually undo that real quick and show you what I did. So sometimes what you'll end up happening is you'll extrude something and it won't go anywhere, and you'll extrude it again. And you can see it starts to look bad. It's because I have multiple vertices on top of themselves here. And if you were to highlight all of it, there's a specials submenu, which is literally called specials. You hit W to bring up this menu. And one of the options, it should be the fifth one, is remove doubles. And then it magically removes all the ones that are exactly on top of each other. And if you have something like this, you can magically fix it by hitting recalculate normals. And I'll talk about that later on today, but that's the magic button for what I just did. All right, so let's make this look more like a cup and less like a tin can. So if we're gonna take this, using B for box select is the easiest thing to usually do. Let's go ahead and pull this up a little bit. So you can pull that up by either using the blue arrow. So Ben Berg asks, would you say that Blender is your favorite modeling application for making cubes? Probably, Ben. It's kind of hard to say. There's a couple different things you can use to make cubes, but cubes are definitely fun to make in Blender. And Ben's picking at me that I'm known for doing games with cubes. But anyways, so if you take this right here, so again, what I was saying was you can move it up and down with this arrow, or you can use grab and then constrain it with the Z axis as another command. So we're going to take this and then scale it up a little bit once we get up here. That looks kind of good. And the basic idea would just be to add this some extra depth and then pull it back down and make all these hollow, like flat faces, which we can do real quick. And you can actually just make this entire thing a face by hitting F. If you're a 3D modeler and trying to pick up Blender, you'll notice that this is not proper. This is what Blender calls an n-gon. So instead of just a polygon, you could have a quad or a pentagon or a hexagon. It's an n-gon. You can have as many sides as you want, and it still works magically. It's something Blender does. But for now, just for learning the basics, this is going to be just fine. So again, to do that, you can highlight that whole ring and hit F, and it's going to make a nice, pretty face there for you. All right, so looks like a simple cut. In 3D reality, it doesn't have any depth. It's a plane that has absolutely no depth. So we're going to take this and make it a little bit better than that. So if you think about with most solo cups, what they have is that little bit of a plastic rim as it goes around the edge. So we're going to make that real quick. And what you would want to do is extrude it and then scale it out. But one of the things that you don't think about is extrusion doesn't allow you to scale. So if I'm trying to pull it over sideways to make it out, it doesn't want to work. So what I'm going to do is hit E, and then you can right click and it stays exactly on top of itself, which is how I got those duplicate vertices earlier. And from here, then I can hit S to scale. And now that's going to give me a nice little rim. So if I move, I can see this a little bit better. And if you're forgetting my movement commands, middle mouse button, it allows you to orbit, and then shift middle mouse allows you to pan. Scrolling is zoom, as you would expect. Okay, so from here, we've got nice little rim of our cup that we can go with. We can extrude this up yet again. And then we can hit E to extrude, right click on top of itself, and then hit S. And I think you can actually simplify that command. If I hit E and then S, yeah, it does work. I never got in that habit earlier. I think it used to not be a thing in earlier versions of Blender, but hitting E and then S immediately allows you to scale your extrusion, which is a good thing. All right, so from here, we're going to take this, just get a little bit more in, and then I want to pull this down and create the bottom of the cup. So I'm going to hit E to extrude, and you can actually see what's happening here is the mesh is going, they're crisscrossing over themselves, and we're going to scale it down once we get down to the bottom here. But for now, this is going to be okay. So we're going to pull it down a little bit to the edge, and then you can scale. So you can actually see that it's right there on the inside. If the solid view is a little too much for you, you can go into a wireframe view. So right down here beside the modes, you have your viewports. So most of the time, the Blender default is the solid shading, but wireframe is also really helpful, especially when you have a lot of detail, which I'll probably be using later on tonight. And you can toggle that with Z, is the nice simple shortcut key for that. Alrighty. No questions, we're moving on. All right, cool. So with this, we actually have not created the bottom of our cup yet. Like this is still an empty circle down here. So I'm gonna use box select for that, and then hit F, and now we have a nice pretty face there. Cool. So with this, we can work with this. It's nothing super fancy, but let's go ahead and add some color to this just to make it a little bit more interesting. So we're gonna add 2 new materials. If you aren't sure where the materials options are, you might be on the scenes by default, but it's this nice little circle over here that's going on. Beside the triangle is the objects view or materials view, and then you can hit the plus to add a new material, I believe. So we're gonna make this red, and then we'll add a new one for cup white. And if you notice, I did that kind of fast right there. Let me see if I can do it again real quick. It's not gonna let me. Okay, but you actually, when you make materials, you have to do it in 2 steps. First, you have to add the slot and then add the material to that. So like right here, I could actually change the material, but I already have the slot here for it. It's the only way you can have multiple materials on a single object here. Cool. So what we have to do is we actually have to assign the materials to certain vertices here, which is a lot easier than it sounds. So first we're going to come up here to the cube red, and just so we can see a difference, drag this and make it red. And that's all nice and red. That's not what you might expect, but it's because the material is already applied to, by default, you have one material applied to the whole thing. And until you break that up into multiple different groupings, it's only going to be usually, I believe, is the first material. So if I was to remove that. It's not going to let me. Whatever. If you could remove it, it should immediately hop to white. But let's go ahead and select everything else and see if we can make it go all to white. So with solo cups, it should be pretty much that rim and the inside, which is what I box selected right there. So we take this, highlight the correct material, and then click Assign. Boom, now we have a nice simple little cup. And you can always make this look better. You know, you can work on this and make it a little more curvy and have more depth to it, but it's a solo cup. They're not meant to be reused a whole bunch of times. They're very simple. Okay, so one thing I want to mention before we get too far in this is that we should rename your objects as you go. It's going to be much more helpful if you do this in the future. And if you're someone who's using Blender in addition to a game engine like Unity, there's actually a second place you need to rename your assets. So the first one is up here in the scene hierarchy view, but the second one is actually the mesh data itself. Yeah, naming conventions is very important. The mesh data itself, if you sometimes you'll be in Unity and you'll try to you named your object correctly, but your mesh is somewhere else, and if you're trying to trade out meshes or something weird, you can have trouble finding it. So it's always good to rename it first in the scene hierarchy, second in the mesh data itself, which is the triangle option, and then right here. So I'm just going to name this one cup, which is nice and simple. Cool. All right, now if you remember, we are in a different layer. We're in the second layer right here. So we're going to go over back to the first layer, and we want to move this back. Now this is going to be gigantic when we come back in, which is going to be great. It's going to be super funny. So if you hit M, it'll allow you to move the object you have selected or multiple objects to the next layer. As long as your mouse is on this, it's not going to go away, but as soon as you walk away, there it goes. So I'm going to click that, and it disappeared just because it's on its first layer. So we click back over here, and boom, now we have this gigantic cup, which is humorous. So let's take this and let's move it up to the top of our table, and let's scale this sucker down a little bit because that's excessive even for me. So let's see here. Nope, we don't want going through the table. That's pretty good. Yeah, it's not too bad. All right, so let's see. This is a big enough table for, I'd say, probably about 4 people. So let's go ahead and grab, it's going through the table. This is because I'm trying to move it without constraining it. So I just hit G, and it's trying to move it in 3D space. So if you remember this from last week, my example, it's not moving it to where you want it. So in order to do that correctly, if I'm from this top view, I would actually have to hit G and then constrain on both the X and Y axis, which it's not how you would normally think. You don't hit X and then Y. You actually hit Shift Z, which is something from like Boolean logic. It's actually not Z, so it's using X and Y, not Z. Or if that's too much for you, just hit 7. You're in the top view, and now you can move it, and it's going to ignore Z-axis movement for the beginning. Cool. So I'm just going to go move it here and then duplicate it with Shift D. So let's go ahead and just add 4 little cups around here for everybody at the table. Cool. So that's starting to look pretty good. One thing I've noticed as I got more experience with Blender is perfection is often looks kind of funny. So slightly imperfect paradigms kind of make things look better. All right, that's pretty good there. I say that as I move it again. Cool. So if we were to render this right now with F12, there we go. We've got some nice fancy little cups going on here. This lighting's really funny. So I'm going to change this lighting really quick because right now what we actually have is a point light. And I wish I could draw it in here. I don't know how to use the Blender grease pencil. But right now there's actually a point light. So you can kind of see how the shadows are casting very low here and really far here. And the glare from the nice glossy grass, as somebody mentioned last week, is right here. So I can see that there's a point light floating right here. So if I go back into the scene, yeah, you can see this object right here is our nice little point light. And that's okay for some things, but for now we're outside. We're just going to make it a sun. So we click, if you notice, some of these options are slightly different because objects are different than lights, so they have different sub-properties. So one of them is a lamp panel, And you can just click sun and boom, that should actually fix our problem right there. Bam. Now we've got a very consistent light across the whole scene. It's pretty bright, so you can turn that down, the energy right here. I'm just gonna notch that down a little bit, and then I'm gonna re-render it. There we go, that's not too bad. All right, so this we can work with. Cool, so we've got consistent shadows, very bright, nice, happy Sunday. Cool, okay. So anybody got any questions so far as we're moving on? I know I'm going kind of fast, but we're just hitting up some stuff. If anybody has anything that they want to add to the scene, either this time or next times, go ahead and throw it out in chat, because I just kind of come up with some stuff that I think would be helpful to learn certain techniques. So to say that next, in lieu of that, we're actually going to go ahead and move to creating a plate. And this one we're actually going to create in this scene, in this layer right here, so that way we can kind of see the differences with that. Oh man. So I'm going to hit Shift-C to center my cursor right here and get a little bit closer. So with this, let's see. We could do this with a cylinder, or we could do it with a circle. The circle would be very similar to the cup. So this time let's do it with a cylinder. So let's see here. All right, so Shift A and then go, let's do it with a cylinder. Cool. All right. So we've got our cylinder right here. Let's go into tab into edit mode. And you can see there's a lot of stuff overlapping right now. So this is why sometimes layers is easier. If you hit Z to go into wireframe mode, this is also super helpful because it kind of takes away all of that extra data, especially if you've got it highlighted. And even if not, it's a different color gray, which is very helpful. All right, so since just like we talked about last week, this little dot in the middle is the origin point. So this, for most things, either needs to be into the center of gravity or the bottom. So if I'm putting this on the floor, like if it's a tree or if it's a plate or the cups or the table, this is what I want to be on the ground. So I'm going to move everything below it up until that point. So I'm hitting Control, using the arrow key and moving that right up. And now, just for the heck of it, since we can, let's go ahead and go back into object mode. Hit Tab to go back, or into Z to go back into standard shader mode. I'm going to take this and move it onto the table so we can kind of model it in perspective to everything else. So that's right there on the table. Let's go ahead and move it right here. So right now it kind of looks like a big old cake plate waiting for somebody's birthday or something, but let's make this into just a nice simple little paper plate. This is not a fancy picnic. So, all right, so from here, now we can kind of judge the scale of everything, which we definitely misjudged with the cups earlier, but that's okay. So now if you hit Tab to go into edit mode, so from here what we actually want to do is a little bit of a weird idea, but we're going to extrude all of these faces on the outside, but not the top and bottom. So because if we did that, if I highlighted all of them and extruded them, well, that actually duplicates it now, which is kind of weird. That's not actually what I thought it would do. Anyways, that's not what we want. We want it to be part of the same object. So what we're gonna do, just in case I have extra doubles, I don't, okay. What we're gonna do is get all of the edges on this cylinder. And the way to do that, you can't do in this standard format, because if I were to select all of these vertices and then all the other vertices, it's going to select the face. So we're going to have to invoke something different, which is face select mode. So there's vertex select, edge select, and face select. 9 times out of 10, don't use face select, in my opinion, in the beginning. It's very powerful when you know what you're doing. And for a long time, I didn't know what I was doing. So you can do pretty much most of the same things with vertex select. It might take a little longer, but sometimes it can get confusing hopping back and forth between them. But for this specific technique, since we're using a cylinder to do this instead of a circle to do this, this is the only real way to extrude these faces outwards. So I went over, let's see. So Decaf Coffee asks, if you were to add, say, nails or screws to the picnic table, how would that be modeled? Would you model the whole nail and screw and overlap them into a table, or would that cause issues? Okay, so that's a good question. I actually thought about that last time. let me finish this that I'm on right now, and then I will pivot back to that because that's a really good question. There's different ways to accomplish that. Some are more there's yeah. Oh, anyway, I'll answer that in a minute. Okay, so let's take this. So go from down here. So we've got our object mode, got the shaders, you've got all your widgets, and then next over is vertex, edge select, and face select. So now you can see it's got the little dots in the middle of all the faces, and if you were to right click that, it selects the whole thing. So if you're trying to right click on the edge, it's not where it's going to be where your vertex is, where you were used to. It's right here in the middle. So there's this nice little shortcut that you can use. It's very useful in so many different situations. But if you hold down Alt and then right click, should be what it is. Yeah, there we go. So it's actually a loop select. So this is more of an obscure selection mode, but it's really, really helpful. And if you don't remember that, especially in this scenario, it's okay because there's an easy way to get around it. But but if I were to go back to vertex and then back to face, you see it actually, it's one of the things where you can only select all of these, the loop around here in this face mode. But if you hold right click if you hold shift and then right click those two faces, the top and bottom, you're gonna select them anyway. So you can either use the loop select to do everything or the select everything and then cancel out those two on the top and bottom. There we go. Okay, got them. Cool. Now then, so we're gonna take this and let's extrude this outwards. Extrude, not scale. So this is one of those cases where I had to hit E, right click, and then scale up. Let me do that again. So hit E. You can see it's trying to do some really funny stuff here. But then you hit right click, so now it's directly on top of itself. You extrude it, and you can see all these extra little dots where there's an extra face there. It's just of 0 dimension. Well, technically it has a length. And so now we're going to scale that so you can start to see the faces starting to have more dimension there. So we're going to take this and I want to scale it, but not in the Z-axis. So I'm going to hit Shift Z to scale that, and then I'm going to move it out a little bit. All right, so now that we've done that, I'm going to go back to vertex select because I like working in here a little bit better. So we're going to take this, let's scale it down or just move the top down because the bottom's already on the table here. There we go. So now we're starting to look a little bit more plately. All right. So yeah, I'll do this since I already told you. So easy way to select all these outer edges. You could go here and blend circle, select all these painfully, but if you already know it, if you hold Alt and right click on the correct edge, there we go, and then Shift Alt right click will keep both. That's going to give you that nice loop select on those outer edges, and then we can just move that up, and we should have something that looks sort of like a plate here in a second. So we're going to scale this down so it looks a little bit closer up. I don't want to move it from our table, because if I scale it down, you can see now it's magically floating in the air. We don't like that. So scale in the Z. Yeah, so that's going to keep us there. Cool. All right, gonna scroll that over there. Let's take these, loop select, Alt. It's a crazy command until you get it right. And the trick to getting the right side, the right edge, is selecting kind of more just as far away from any other edge as you can. It'll help Blender get you to find the right one, the right edge that you're trying to actually loop. So there we go. So that's the basics of a simple plate. That's a pretty good scale too. All right, so let's go ahead and move this over here. Let's see here. Go ahead and move in the top view. We're going to select both of these and duplicate them. So now that's not right. Good. There we go. Now we've got something. Alrighty, and I forgot to name all of these. Great. So you know what? I'm just going to undo that real quick and say plate, and under mesh data, plate again. And it'll name them plates just like this one, 01, 02, 03s. And I'm okay with that for now. This isn't anything fancy. If you wanted to be better about your naming conventions in Blender, message me about that, and I can tell you because that's a little. You can do some really cool stuff with it, but a little more in depth than what I'm trying to do for today. All right, so if we go ahead and hit F12 to render that, we've got some nice little plates here. All right, so a couple minutes ago, Decaf Coffee asked a question about if we were to add bolts and screws to this table, how would you do it best? So there's a couple different ways you could do it. If you were going for something, if this was just a background object in a scene in a game, you could actually probably just put it on the texture itself and bump map it to make it look like there was something there in the wood, as opposed to actually modeling it. Yeah, so he did actually suggest, would you put an actual physical nail and like a full model and drill it in? That could cause issues. It's one of those things that I know how I would do it now, and I probably would if I was doing it initially. Well, let's say right here real quick. So probably the easiest way to do it would be like, let's say I wanted to put a bolt like right here between these two panels. Then I would actually go ahead and put a full bolt through that. So let's see, just let me do this real quick just to show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to Shift A, add a cylinder, rotate it 90 degrees. We're going to scale this sucker down a little bit. Boom. And then scale it in the Y. That's going to give us some depth. We only need it a little bit right there. No, wait, we're inside the table. Okay. So now we can grab it over here and then sideways. All right. So, and if we were to take this, just so we can see a difference, we're going to make a new material here, bolt, and just a little bit darker color. There we go. And then assign it. All right, so that's honestly like one of the easiest ways just to get around it. And you could add more detail, obviously, by putting like a nut and everything on here. If I wanted to do it really well, I would duplicate it just so we can have some consistency here. So if we were to turn to that, you can kind of see that there's that extra detail there. It kind of depends on what you're doing. If you want to make it for a game and you're trying to be really conservative with your poly count, probably wouldn't do something like this. If you were trying to do something for, making a really realistic rendering, you still probably would only model the top part of it. But as far as for speed goes, just putting a bolt straight through like this is probably easier. If you wanted to do it a really cool way, you can model the bolt and then put a Boolean modifier between the table mesh and the bolt mesh, which is advanced. Hopefully I'll get to that at some point, but that'd be the real way that I would like to do it nowadays. And that's really fun because it actually subtracts away the mesh that is colliding with the table leg in this case. So you would have the bolt head on one side, the bolt head on the other, and all that stuff that I put in the middle would be taken out. So that's a really cool modifier to use.
Hey Zach, I've actually got a question here. I'm going to interrupt your stream here.
No, go ahead, please.
So imagining that this was an object that was in a game and you wanted to make it, like a collidable object. Let's say somebody running into the picnic table. You've got it bolted down, or you've got the table as one solid object, but yet all the cups and the plates are a different object. So like if I were to run and crash into this table, and to make sure that all the other pieces would physically fly away, like if you were driving a car and you crashed into this table, that you've got this beautiful picnic set up. Anything I need to keep in mind about setting up this scenario or this whole works in order to make sure that the plates and the cups would go off physically in different directions?
So if I was to import this like right now into into Unity, and try to do that, that should work. Like if I was just to hit the table, the cups and the plate should all fly off, as long as they have physics objects placed onto them, obviously. Yeah. Now, are you asking about breaking the table apart as well, or just having the cups and plates fly off?
Yeah, like making sure that the table either stays solid or breaks apart. Is this a situation where you need to make sure that the table would either stay in one piece or you would want it to break apart, or yeah.
So I've seen people accomplish this different ways. I think there's actually a Blender plugin for like creating fractures between your objects. So like if I let me just go onto a new layer real quick and add a cube. So like if I was to go here and I wanted to make this crack in the middle, I can do loop cuts, and this adds extra vertices. And you can actually create these into separate objects. And this I think what the plugin actually does would actually create these into two separate objects. But then when you're here, it looks like one, and you crack it in the game, and it actually responds as multiple. But even still, with that, usually what I've seen people do is kind of animate those so that way it cracks. Like if you swipe your sword in Dark Souls, the box is going to crack and fall. Often, they're much better than what I'm talking about here. But in a lot of simple games, it usually just cracks and falls in the same way every time. So it's a responsive animation using that breaking style. Now, if I wanted to take this right here, because each of these objects are actually different. It's not a single mesh. It's different cubes for every single one of these. So you actually could make it respond in interesting ways with that, just because. If I'm thinking about this right, sorry, I hit too many keys sometimes. You could actually hit, I think it's Control P or Shift P, something like that. No, Alt P. One of these keys is when you have too many shortcut keys. P, here we go. Okay, so it's just P. You can actually separate the whole thing. Did I do it right? No, I didn't. Okay. Separate by loose parts. So now each of these objects are actually unique. So probably if I was to try to do this, like if I was wanting to run a car through it, I would probably do something along these lines, and then have them all parented under an empty game object in Unity, and then once you get hit, then they can respond differently. I don't know. There's different, yeah, definitely different scenarios of which you would it's one of those things that doesn't have a cookie cutter answer. There's so many different scenarios for that you would probably want to approach it different ways for each scenario. That's a good question.
Yeah, I did mean to distract you from your workshop here. So please continue.
Oh no, you're good.
That was fun. That's good to know. So as of right now, if I were to run a car into it, it would break into all the different objects and fly in whatever direction physics was applied.
Well, yeah, basically. Well, it's okay. Immediately now, no, it would respond as one because I undid everything. But yeah, otherwise it would respond as unique objects if you broke them all apart with that P by loose parts command. Yeah. Now, cool. So now I can actually grab a single board and fly it off into the distance.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yep. Alrighty. Any other questions? Doesn't look like any other questions now. So let's see. What did I have? Let's try to model a watermelon. We can actually have something on our plates. That would be interesting. So we're going to do a very simple watermelon. Nothing super complicated, but we're going to go a little more complicated than we need to just for the sake of this. All right. So with a watermelon, really all we have is a wedge with a circle rind. And there's different ways you could try to accomplish this. You could try to build it all by hand and make it like a cylindrical half wedge. So let me show you what I'm talking about right quick. So you could try to do it with a cylinder, cut this half off, take the top, make a face, take the bottom, make a face, and take this and make a face. Scale the whole thing down. Uh-oh, I hit something I'm not supposed to. There we go. Okay. So you could do this, do a slice of watermelon, but we'll be a little bit more intricate than that. So what we're gonna actually do is do more like a circular slice. What I mean by that is, I actually can't think of. So if you were to, let's say, take the whole watermelon and like divide it into quarters long ways down the cylinder or down the like oval, 3D oval. So let's actually do it with this sphere right here. So what we're gonna do, so hit Shift A and go down to, there's two types of spheres. There's an icosphere and a UV sphere. UV spheres have faces in a latitude longitude sense, so just think like a globe. The icosphere is much more like a D20, or I think you can actually bump it up with more faces, so it looks more like a soccer ball if you subdivide it that way. But that's kind of the differences. For most people, they generally use the UV sphere. If you want to save faces, you can use the icosphere if you don't really care about the faces too much. But let's take this, and so we've got it looking more like the globe, but let's take it and rotate it on its side. So I'm going to go into side view, hit rotate, and holding down control, and in this bottom corner down here where it says view, if you can see my mouse, around here is where it's actually going to say the degree. So we're just going to rotate to even 90 degrees. So there we go. We've got it right on that edge. And let's cut away most of this so that way we actually have a little wedge that we can work with. So let's just, there's a couple different ways we can do this. I'm going to do this the slightly more arduous way for now, and use C for circle select and highlight all these guys on the outside here. If you do mess up, you can always, like if you're doing this style and you mess up, you can always come out here and holding shift, you can take out the extra ones that you created. So that way you don't have too many extras. All right, that's still a little bit bigger. I'm gonna go ahead and add in this last row here too. Alrighty. And that should be everybody. Cool, so we're gonna take that and hit delete. So now we've got a eaten watermelon. Let's go ahead and add some interesting data to this. So if we were gonna do this in a game engine right now, probably the easiest thing to do would be to take these outer edges, just make a line across here, take these and then make faces. And that's probably not the perfect way, but anyways, and with this, then then you'd actually put the texture on it for the rind layer, then the white between the rind and the juicy red part, and then the red fruit part that most people enjoy. So, but since I'm not doing texturing today, let's actually just do this with faces, and we can assign materials to them that way. Take this. So what we're actually going to do with that then is, and this will allow us to do some really pretty cool tricks. We're just going to take each of these. All right, and then this last little bit. Oh, we've got one side because we're just going to do this one at a time. I think. And do we? Yeah, we'll just do it one at a time for now. So from here, if we were to extrude this and we're wanting to scale it in, it actually scales down, which is not ideal. We want this all to be at the same level. But it kind of can look a little bit funny because see now, if you look at this, it's not great there. It's actually coming out from your object. It's not perfectly where you want it. So it's got some problems. Do this a different way. So what you can do is it's scaling towards the average of all of these points here. And that's because that's what you're telling it to do. There's just another option to change that. So between edit mode, viewports, and all the different widgets is this nice little pivot point. So this is where everything is actually going towards. So if I was to, where your widgets will be, where you do math calculations, if you're trying to scale off of it, if you're trying to rotate, it's all based off of this. So what you can actually do is move off your 3D cursor. So if your cursor is still centered, and if not, hit Shift-C and scroll back in because there's a lot of stuff in here. With that, if we scale, it's actually going to scale exactly to that point, which is really, really cool and very helpful for stuff like this. So that and scale it right there, which is great. Then we're going to take time. Right, so E and then S to scale, and then that layer's a little thinner. And if we were doing this the right way, we would probably want, instead of this to be an n-gon, we would want it to be different triangles. So let's go ahead and actually just make it different triangles. So we're going to actually extrude it, and then we could extrude it and scale it all the way to 0. Or if you want to learn a new trick, you can hit doubles for special, or W for specials, go to merge, which is the 4th one, and then you can say at center. Oops, not at that, probably at cursor. Let's see. Usually it's at center because that's where it is. Yeah, there we go. It's at cursor. So now we've got that nice little thing done right there. Cool. So then we can take this side and gonna undo that. Probably could have done these at the same time, but we're already here now, so don't worry about it. All right. So I'm just hitting E and then S to scale. I'm slowly scaling in. Then I'm taking all of that and hitting E, W, and merge at cursor. Cool. But now I actually have 2 points on top of each other. So if you see, it kind of goes back and forth between one side and the other because there's 2 points that are identically on top of each other. Same with these right here. So what you can do is hit A to highlight all, and then also under the specials is remove doubles. And up here in the corner, you'll actually see if it removes any doubles. So remove 5 vertices. So now this is just one vertex right here in the middle, which is great. So all these little triangles on here will actually help us out in the future when we get this going. So let's go back into shader mode so we can actually see this thing in object mode. And there we go. All right, and so now one thing you do have to remember is our widget's way down here because it's still at the pivoting for the 3D cursor. So now if you put it back to median point, which again is the average of all the points, or in this case just one, so it's the origin. If you hit another one, you can see it's averaging between those. So now we can take this, and just like we did with the solo cups, we can actually add some colors on here and assign them to the mesh. So we can make this, spell this right this time, watermelon green, everything. There we go. We're going to be pasting this a couple times. The new watermelon white, and then watermelon red. Alrighty, so we're going to take the green, make it a nice, happy little, kind of, usually watermelon's kind of more of a dark green, I think. So we'll do a little bit darker. And you can see it's this, again, it's this first material that's applied to the whole thing. And until we start clicking assign, it's not going to register that. And assign goes to everything else that you have selected. Okay, so, and if you know your loop cut shortcut keys, you can hit loop cut, which is Alt right click, and then Alt left right click again, and then hold. And if you're holding down Shift, it allows you to select both of them. Yep, if you do that, go. So with that, we can assign that color right there, and it's usually kind of, it's a white, but it's kind of a blended white. And then we've got this reddish right here, and it's kind of, what color red is it? Probably about that. We'll do that right here. Assign that, boom. So now we have a nice fancy little watermelon. And it's actually got a nice sheen to it, which again, somebody mentioned last week. If you want to take that off, you'll notice, so if you look over here, it's this nice shiny white spot. You can actually take that off with the specular. So the diffuse is pretty much the color of it, and then the specularity is the color reflecting off of it. For people who are artists and have much more to do with lights, this is something that you can correct me on. Please do. I'm still learning, but that's basically, it's basically what color you're reflecting and how much of it you're reflecting whenever you have a light shining. So cool. So now we've got this handy dandy little watermelon, and we can go ahead and move it on to our plates. Now this is huge, like gigantic. So we're going to scale it down a little bit. Something a little bit more manageable. Alrighty. that's placed pretty well. It's not too far into. Okay, that is kind of far into the plate, but there we go. Again, also why frame view is very helpful. So we're going to go ahead and duplicate this across all the different plates. And if you want to make this a little bit more interesting, which we always like to make it more interesting, at least if it's not too much difficult, we can rotate them a little bit. That way it's not, the same cookie cutter thing for every single person. Can probably, let's see if we can, this was a good time to use this widget. So we've been using just the arrows widget for a long time. There's actually a widget for rotating as well. And then you can grab those and move it. It looks kind of funny because it's on the global XYZ, which you can change to, I think we want local. There we go. And give it a little bit more, just some interesting angles to these guys. That way they're more than just sitting on here. So if we go ahead and render that, there we go. We've got a nice little scene going on here. All right, any questions? Any suggestions? I think we're about out of time. Running a little close to time. One thing we can do right quick before we head out. This is something that I experimented with a lot when I was just getting into Blender. There's this great little tool that they moved, and I hadn't found it for years, but I found it yet again. You can subdivide, and it's called Fractal, which is not like your normal fractal that you think of with the triangles subdividing themselves and holes in the middle. Anyways, it's not like that. It's just adding random jitter to your mesh data, which is really fun and can add detail without you putting in a whole bunch of effort. So right now we have a very flat, very boring grass box right here. But what we can do actually with very little effort is subdivide this, and then we're going to add some jitter to the subdivision. So when you subdivide, it's just adding in more cuts. And so you can actually control the cuts with this right here. If you've hidden this pane from yourself, it's the T panel. Hit T and it'll open it back up. And you can add the number of cuts. And so we're gonna start right there. I don't know if I want to do fractal yet or not. I think I want to wait on that. So just go ahead. So it's W for specials, and then subdivides the second one. I'm just gonna subdivide it twice or 4 times, I think. Where is it? There it is. Yeah, 3 times. So it's four box of grid. That's confirmed. Once this is gone, you know your command's confirmed. Oops, should see. There we go. And then let's go ahead and subdivide with a much higher fractal. There we go. So you can see it's adding a lot more jitter to it. And you could turn it up way too much where this is, earthquake picnic day. But we're gonna just turn it up just a little bit. And the more you subdivide it as well, the smoother that starts to kind of look out. This is fun, and this isn't super effective for if you're wanting to use this in a game. It's just creating a whole bunch of extra mesh data. That's probably not super helpful. But if you're working in just Blender, this is great. But now, if you look at it, is this? You can see all these faces, which doesn't look super good. So we can actually set those to a smooth styling. So over here on the T panel, we might have to be in edit mode for this to work. Let me see. Oh, nope, there it is. So top one under tools and shading for smooth. So now you can see instead of the flat faces where you can see every single face, it's much smoother. So the rendering engine smooths that out. And you can see now you don't see it super well, but you can see, especially right here, where the table shadow becomes much more interesting. If I turn down the color, you could probably see it a little bit better, maybe not. But yeah, let's keep ourselves from having it too floating of a table. Just taking this and making sure that the table is actually kind of inside of the ground, so that way it's not just floating randomly on top of things. Oh, yeah, So that's a nice, fun way to get you some interesting mesh data without too much effort. So, any final questions? You got anything, Brian?
I don't see. Well, I could ask you a million questions, but like I said, I got lost when you said file start new. But it doesn't look like we have any other questions on chats. HDI Andrew says he does like new tricks, which you have shown us plenty of them tonight. This has been this has been great for a part 2. I mean, come on, part 2, really? That's awesome. So thank you again, Zach. This has been an awesome tutorial with Blender and just getting started. Folks, if you're curious about part 1, be sure to check out our YouTube and search for our workshops. You will definitely see the part 1. And hey, thank you, Decaf Coffee. Thank you. It's been fantastic, he says. So I guess it's my turn to talk a little bit. So I will just say real quick, thanks to our Patreons. The Georgia Game Developers Association is a nonprofit organization, so your support will help us to improve game developers and their community, as well as helping bring better games to life, including art, right? 3D art. So patreon.com/Georgia Game Devs. Definitely, we appreciate your support. If you're interested in following us on social media, if you want to follow Zach, which tell us what your handles are, Zach.
I'm Blue Hat Zach, and that's Zach with an H if you didn't already figure that out. But Blue Hat Zach at Twitter is one of the easiest ways to get in contact with me if you have any Blender questions. But pretty much if I'm on a social media, that's my handle.
All right, very good. And then let's see what else we got here. If you're near Atlanta, or 2018, this week, or is it this week? No, it's next. Yeah, no, it is this week. Oh, I'm sorry. MomoCon. If you're here in Atlanta for MomoCon this week, there is a career fair at 10 a.m. on May 24th. That's 2018 for our late viewers at the Omni Hotel in downtown Atlanta. And immediately after that, join us for the Georgia Esports League Spring Championship at MomoCon, where college students are going to be competing for more than $6,000 in scholarships. Where did today's times go where you can play video games and win college money? Yeah, right. So go to ggda.org for more information to register your college team. Or I think that it may be too late for registration, but it's still such a cool thing to see. And then also, if you're around Atlanta during the first weekend of October, check out SiegeCon. That's siegecon.net. And we will definitely be doing more of the Georgia Esports League, playing video games and competing for college scholarships. What else have we got here? Next week, get this. This was just booked this afternoon. Oh, hey, I guess I could kind of show who's talking here, right? Here we go. Yeah. Well, ta-da. Hey, this is the voice that hasn't been showing you Blender. But anyway, check this out. Next week, we are going to finally be doing part 3 of the Unity certification course. That's right. So be sure to tune in if you're interested in becoming certified in Unity. Be sure to tune in all of our channels. That's Mixer, Twitch, and YouTube/Georgia Game Devs. And check out part 3 of Unity certification. All right. Which will be the final one as well. And what else do I have here?
Talk about Zapmill.
Zapmill? Who, me? Gosh, yeah. Me, my company. All right, so my company is Zapmill, ZAPMIL .com. If you're interested, I do after school programs and summer camps. Unfortunately, all of my summer camps this year have been completely booked up. But you can definitely check out my website to see some of the games that the kids have created. It's so cool. But also to be able to check out, future after-school programs coming up in the near future. Thanks, Zach, for pointing that out. Right? Get social with us. Instagram, Twitter, at ggda.org. Facebook, you can find us facebook.com/group/ggda.org. And, and as for Siege, if you're in Atlanta and if you're into game development and you're cool, you feel like joining us, for speaker, we're looking for more speakers, so you can go to ggda.org for more information about that as well. I believe that's about it. So, Zach, thank you so much for part 2 and Blender. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody else, for tuning in. I'm going to throw one more commercial in your face, everybody. So thank you for tuning in, and everybody have a great